Hello, everybody. Ray Hiltz here, and welcome to another episode of the Ready to Go Show. Today, we will be discussing ageism in digital marketing. And yes, to look at me, you're going to say, well, he's got a vested interest in the subject. And yes, yes, I do, along with the panel, three of which are probably in my bracket. And when we have one young lady, Jessica, who's going to represent the other side. So today, we're going to be talking about, is there ageism in the digital marketing space? If so, why? And if you feel you've been discriminated against, or if you feel you don't have any choices, what can you do? I mean, if you're over 40 and you want to work in digital marketing, what are the options? So it should be a very interesting show. We're playing on the event page, so if you're there, leave some comments. Comment tracker doesn't seem to be working very well. Quelle surprise. So just leave your comments, and someone was going to keep track of it, and we'll add it to the show. After the show, join us for an after-show blab, which follows immediately after the show. Randy today will be sitting in as co-chair, and we'll be discussing this and inviting you to join along in the conversation. So let's say hi to the panel. BL, how are you?
Well, I'm okay. I'm here in New York City, and it's the leaves are turning, and it's getting beautiful, and it's just a nice place to be right now.
Uh-huh. I love this time of year is nice when it's not, before it gets all sloppy and, when the leaves are still on the trees. Jessica, how are you doing?
Hello! Doing very well. We just got back from southern Missouri visiting my dad for the weekend, so that was quite fun. And as beautiful as it is here, cool and crisp, but not so cold that we're shivering and cuddling up with our blankets yet.
Good. Randy, you're down south. Is it chilly or?
It's a little. We're getting the rain that came off the Gulf that hit Mobile and Northwest Florida yesterday. So we're starting to get that. It's a blustery and dreary day in Southeast Georgia today. But I'm glad to be here.
That was a huge storm, and we're expecting remnants of that tomorrow here in Montreal, and they're expecting quite a bit of rain from that. That's amazing when you think of it.
Yeah,
I had a friend of mine's Bertram yacht sunk yesterday in Pensacola Bay, so it was pretty bad. The wind I think they were having 40 and 50-mile-an-hour gust of winds and things like that. So.
Wow. Scotty, what's things like in Seattle?
Oh, just wonderful. It's so boring. The skies are gray, and, autumn is about a month late here, but still can't complain. It's just perfect.
Okay, so on with the subject, ageism. I mean, obviously, it doesn't just affect the marketing industry and the tech industry. It affects pretty well everywhere. I mean, I worked again in restaurants, and definitely that's a situation there. I think the median age in restaurants is less than 30. If 30, that's pushing it. So I did some research, and I want to give a shout out to Hesse Jones from our company, who gave me some resources. They do this excellent series called Think Tank, where they talk about culture, work culture, and they talk about millennials and boomers and Gen X's in the workplace, and how they get along, how they see each other. And it's a very good series, so I recommend you check it out. One of the things that she said in one of the articles, first of all, I'm going to bring it up actually because it was a little depressing. It was an article written by Sherry Worrell, and it was an answer to a blog post that they put up about boomers. And that was in the Boomer Think Tank. And Sherry Worrell says, marketing and advertising have forgotten about us. Boomers currently make up the largest generation with buying power, yet the industry reduced their boomer budgets to market to millennials. We just don't matter anymore to anyone. I really wanted to have a glass of scotch after I read that. It was kind of depressing. Can you, I don't know, do you understand where she comes from when she says that? Anybody want to chip in there?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Okay, go ahead. Before I was 30, I owned a PR firm, and I grew that firm into one of the 100 largest independent firms in the country. And the big issue that I had was that I was too young, to be taken seriously. So, it was kind of funny. But, good work is the thing that distinguishes you at any age. And, of course there's discrimination. And, of course, there are people who say, only people who are digital natives. You had an ad, looking for a digital native. there's always going to be that. Are you going to let that stop you? Is that stopping me from working, from making a living? No. Is it stopping me from getting a full-time job? Probably. I believe that there are algorithms that kick out your resume. I've seen it in action. If you have certain words or don't have certain words, you just never get to the hiring manager. But, that's why people have to be entrepreneurial. And if you do good work will help, will make it happen. And I personally, I've reinvented myself so many times. I'm in the process of doing it again. I'm not ready to talk about it, but I've got a whole new thing going on. And, I'm never going to stop. And I pity people who say, oh, I just can't understand the internet. Oh, God, how do you do all that? How do you keep up with that? Because I love it. And if you love it, that comes across.
Ain't that the truth? We've had for a long time the middle class has kind of been stagnating, and as the middle class stagnates, I think that that affects the boomers. You could almost say that in boom times that favors the boomers, but in lean times that favors the millennials. So.
But I would say that what we're experiencing now, and this is kind of this doesn't mean to be a gloss over, but because we are so connected and everything is just like the news feed, we get everything instant. It's no different. Advertising and things like that are no different today in their target markets than they've always been. And your question or the talk of the day was really about, if you're a boomer, you're in your 50s, 40s, 60s, or whatever, and you're going out trying to get a job in the digital space, say at an agency or something like that, your dream's probably not going to happen. If you're not already sitting in that spot and producing and built your own agency, as BL said she did, and whatever, if you haven't already done that, that's probably not going to happen. So if you've got the entrepreneurial spirit and you have the skill sets to operate in the digital space, yeah, I think you can do that. But let's just think about this. If we back up talking about target marketing audiences, remember when Viagra first hit the market, when that sex saving, bringing sex back to the older generation, who did they market to? They marketed in magazines like Golf, and they were gearing towards that segment of the population. They weren't putting it on Saturday morning cartoons. So I mean, it's no different today than it ever has been. I don't think.
Okay.
I mean, you're always gonna that 18 to 25 and that 18 to 35 age bracket is always going to be the prime spot. Those are the people coming on. Those are the people that are paying attention, and who's going to buy and just go to the mall and hang out and buy every damn thing that comes along.
Well, so way back in the olden days, yes. I mean, I think companies and marketers always marketed to the young. I mean, in the 60s, it was all about marketing to the new generation, and it was called the new generation at that time. But people trying, as you say, people trying to actually get work, and as BL said, being young actually worked against you. They wanted someone who was responsible, that had life experiences, usually a degree, whatever. But now,
but you mentioned agency work, right?
Yes.
And agency work. If you've ever really worked in an agency, you got to understand something. They want to bring you in, and they want to see if you've got a skill set, right? Your skill set is sales. Okay, so they're going to put you as an account manager, managing accounts, proving yourself. If you have a desire to be a creative director, a lot of those creative directors, they do an internship before they get a journeyman position in some kind of agency. And if you're any good, you're going to jump 3 or 4 agencies before you ever get to that directorship. So I mean, today what you find is people start some friggin' online agency, and they're the director of marketing, they're the creative director, they're the art director, and they're everything director. And that in agency life, that is not how it works.
So we're talking here, our crew here, the panel here are pretty well we all are self-employed basically, right? We all work for ourselves and we're entrepreneurial. Jessica, what's your take on that? Is there ageism in the digital marketing agencies?
There is, and I would agree in general, because I sold my first company when I was 21. Started it when I was right as I was beginning college. I joined the team that put it all together, and we grew it and we sold it. And then my job was to go travel and be part of the executive senior meetings because I was one of the executives now. But there was at least a 30-year age gap between me at 21 and anybody else sitting in that room. And I was willing to learn, but nobody was willing to teach me. And I think that's something that I've struggled with as I've been coming up through this is there's so much that there is to learn. All I can do is watch and absorb and try and figure it out and add it to my internal skill sets of, how am I going to resolve conflict? How am I going to problem solve? How am I going to bring value in a new way? And more importantly, how can I relate to people in a way that they will listen and I can start the conversation so that we can come up with the best solution or the best option that everybody can buy into regardless of their age. And I struggled with that the whole time I was at that company. And
that's exactly what we've done to ourselves, though. In my culture growing up, I mean, like I said, you would come in as a junior thing, and then you had that mid-manager or executive level manager, and they kept Jessica down there. They didn't want to share it. And then because of the sweep of baby boomers, and somebody looked around one day and said, "Holy crap, man, we're fixing to lose a lot of raw talent here. We haven't passed that talent down to the next people." So some of these millennial groups, these younger groups coming in, they don't have walls. They take the silos down and they share information and they don't worry about titles.
That's not happening.
Well, it might not be, but that is how you overcome that.
I agree with you, and being on the other side, I would completely 100% agree with you, Randy. And in the sense that I think kids that know it all, and I guess in this group I still am the kid. So there's a lot for me to learn, and sometimes I take on that. Well, I know it all still. Well, part of that energy, part of what creates a relevance and part of what creates an opportunity is the willingness to step back and say, no, I don't know it all, or I don't have to have the answer. I just know who I can go talk to. And that's where, there's this book that I read to Carter called I Like Me. It's about a pig, and this pig walks around and she's like, I like to make cookies by myself, and I like to ride my bike by myself, and I like to work by myself, and man, do I make messes by myself, and boy, do I mess up by myself. But I get up and I try again and I keep going, and I think that is something that's timeless and ageless, that if somebody who is in a boomer group recognizes somebody who goes, oh, there's a little bit of that ability to want to learn. There's a little bit, there's something there, and they're open to receiving some wisdom. You now have this opportunity to build a relationship. But I think boomers have to be looking for those people as much as millennials, and I'll even say Generation X, need to be looking up for somebody they can learn from, because there is a gap, and without that conversation being able to start or continue.
So I want that book, and to quote Samuel Jackson in Pulp Fiction, which I watched the other night, that sounds like one charming freaking pig.
Well, what you're saying, Jessica, reminds me of the photo, the meme I put up from the Oscar Wilde quote, I'm too old to know everything. Mm-hmm. And it's true, right? I mean, as you get older, you understand, you comprehend what you actually don't know. And I guess we're agreeing that there is ageism, and we want to talk about actually getting work as opposed to, because I think probably the way that we have to deal with it for anybody over 40 who wants to get into marketing, you pretty well have to do it yourself. It's going to be hard to break into an agency, and in digital marketing, it seems unlike size, age does matter. And I think that it's not so much how we feel about ourselves, but how others perceive. And there's a couple of things that I saw when I was doing research, and some stereotypes about older workers are, one, they're too set in their ways, they're too expensive to employ, and they're not tech savvy. So who wants to address any of those?
I think all of those are relevant and probably for the most part generally right. I mean, now if you've been fortunate enough to go through a career and you have some income, or you have some savings, and you don't need a job, and you're willing to take a job at $25,000 a year or $30,000 a year, then you probably can get a work. You might can find a job. If you're 40 and you're an old white guy at 40, it might be difficult, but you can. But if you're somebody that has worked and made in a six-figure frame and you're used to that type of lifestyle, the chances are, like I said, if you weren't already there and you took yourself out of the workforce, or you got trimmed back during the
More likely.
More likely, and you're still trimmed back, you're probably not going to get employed.
Well,
Or
you said something before, Randy, about agencies, and I think there is a difference between the advertising world and the marketing world, because in the advertising world, you're 50, you are gone. I mean, you are not going to find somebody getting a job at 50 in an ad agency, no matter what their skills. That is not going to happen.
Well, I got a couple of friends that are over 50 that are in agencies, so I mean.
That just got their jobs.
No, and I said that. I said that. To be clear, I told you, you're not going to get that.
Yeah, and however, I do think that it is possible at this point to find work in the marketing side, but agency life is really, in my opinion, a little unpleasant and frantic. I mean, I think there was an article in the New York Times the other day, and they noted that a lot of startups are trying to change the world, and they're run by 25-year-olds who don't know much about being 85 or being a caregiver. And these are companies that are trying to start businesses that help older people. And, there's that perspective thing. There's that idea that if you don't have perspective, you can't come in and solve all the problems of the world. So this is going to be a roundabout discussion because there's no real answer to this.
No, there's no answer to it. Well, there is an answer. Yes, ageism, it does happen. That was the question of the show. But there are things we can maybe suggest or give advice or even just sharing our own experiences. But you spoke of something, BL, and it reminded me of a quote that I had found as well, and it's from Ryan Pennell. He says, ageism will always exist. When the old get old, it's sad. Another tearjerker quote. They should be seen as the guardians of knowledge. The world of elders should come back. We discount their expertise because today older people are not hip with the times. Technology is that arbitrator of currency, and I think that whole general knowledge, the liberal arts thing, the value of living as long as you have and gaining the experience you have is not a valuable asset for some reason. Everything is so specific, everything's so niche oriented, and I was wondering,
it's not as valuable until you get to that age tip over point in your life.
But it's not valuable. I don't think it's seen as valuable from employers.
Right, because they're looking for ROI, they're looking for cost savings, they're looking for all of these other things.
I can hire somebody under 30 for $30,000 and they'll work their ass off. Right? Or I can go over there and get Randy, who really wants to be paid $75,000 for the same damn job, and he's not going to work his ass off, So that's the perceived value.
But he won't need to put in as many hours, and he won't have marketing emergencies because he has experience.
That's not the way business. That's not the way.
Well, but that's the way the world is. That's a fact.
Yeah, well, that's not the way business is.
So, as a person, wherever we are in the workforce, wherever, like my age or your age, there are some soft skills that come into play here. Overcoming adversity, and part of overcoming adversity is having the courage to recognize, wow, crap is going to happen. So how am I going to handle that? How am I going to personally take that on and respond to that and show up the next time? Am I going to get up or am I not? And I think when we think about some of those things and we're looking at the agency, we can recognize where the adversity occurs, and being the cool problem solvers that we are, tapping into that creativity, tapping into, okay, how is somebody doing something, and what does my experience, what does the wise information that I have gathered in my head and observed, how can I do this differently for them? How can I add value? How can I bring something that they're missing? Because it's when a specific need is being met, just like finding clients. We're talking about being in the job here. Finding a job is the same way. What can we do to add value, which requires a lot of research and a lot of time and a lot of willingness to build relationships to be able to overcome that adversity?
I think that comes from the top down. I mean, if you're in a managerial situation, yes. But I'll give you an example, for instance. My partner works in a translation department for a very large company. and they tend to want to hire youngish grads. And he says the biggest problem that he encounters is that these people don't have a world experience. They don't know enough about general things. And when you're translating things, you have to put them. It's not Google Translate. It's not word for word for word. You have to put things into context, and people don't have the context. Perhaps what we're saying is that in a marketing agency, context doesn't matter. Maybe you just have to be able to do a web design, or you have to do a project or that kind of thing. Maybe employees don't want or don't need that kind of experience, and maybe we shouldn't even be looking at digital marketing as a career choice if you're definitely over 40.
Well, here's an insight I had from my very first career, which is in broadcasting and in radio, and that is that you've got tons of small market stations, and you've got young people. And Randy, you were just absolutely right on target, because you've got a young person who will work twice as hard for half the money and on weekends, and then there'll be the vacation time that they will then go out and market themselves to other stations, and they go up the ladder kind of horizontally. They just kind of climb up the ladder that way. But there are only so few number of major market stations where you can make a lot of money. So, there are just so many seats on the stagecoach, whatever metaphor that you want to use. So most of them, get to a certain point, and then someone else comes along who's willing to work twice as hard for half the money at radio stations, and they knock them off. And then the people who are on air, then they migrate over to sales, because there's always nobody likes that. But you've got all these people who are kind of in second-tier small markets, and a small handful of people who've made it at the top because there are only so many places there.
What do those people have in common? The ability to problem solve, the world experience, the context that Ray was talking about.
Don't lose fact that in agency life, corporate life, there's always politics, right? So as you're doing that horizontal slide that Scott was just talking about, you're not going to want to hire somebody on your team that possibly, because they come in and they've got more experience than you or something like that, they can outshine you. There's politics there.
Not necessarily. It's like the NBA. There are any of the professional sports. You've only got so many pro teams, so you've got thousands of people saying, I'm going to be a football player, but you've only got hundreds or maybe scores who will actually make it in any season.
Well, that's just like the greeting position at your local Walmart, right? They need a greeter. How many applications do you think they get for that greeter position nowadays? It's just it's massive. The demand is there.
But what you just said about, you don't want to hire somebody who might outshine you, I think the smartest leaders do. I think the smartest leaders are the ones who are hiring their replacements.
That goes back to what Scott just said. There's only so many there. So everyone doesn't have the smartest. You got a lot of cutthroats in there and a lot of sharks that are swimming around that are looking to get to that VP level or that executive VP level that they don't want that. So
but it comes down to who you know. So now we're talking about relationship skills, Randy, and I think that's a really good point you bring up.
Yeah. Now, if you go, just say if I walked in and Jess had an agency and she's in a hiring position and she needs somebody that maybe has some creative talent, right? And I say, hey, and I position myself that I am of no threat to her. In other words, I just want to come in, I want to work, I want to give you a good job. I'm not looking to be in this agency to be a leader or to be an owner or to be a partner, right? I just want to do some work because I need some supplemental income, or I'm not ready to sit down and die yet, right? I want to keep going forward. But that becomes to what Jess just said. It comes down to who you know and selling yourself and trying to position yourself to get that job.
But I'm not so sure why are we talking about agencies, because I think we can agree that agencies are pretty much the last place that older workers are going to find work. I think we need to talk about the situations where work may exist, and I think that is actually at a corporate level and in a much different situation than agencies. I would agree that agencies are, looking for the youngest people at the cheapest rate, whether or not they have skills they think they can help them get them, and ultimately I don't think that's
Do you
the
think there's
answer.
opportunities in corporate America for?
I think there are more opportunities. It depends on the type of companies that you look at. It depends on the type of opportunities that you want. It depends on the type of skills that you have. But, what scares me about most of the older people I know is that they do not keep up with technology. And if you apply for a job, they don't care how much experience you have. Nobody cares how much experience you have. What they want to know is, how much are you knowing about technology? How much are you up to date with what's going on? How much can you bring in from that point of view? And if you have a resume that doesn't have those qualities, nobody's even going to talk to you. So, I think we have to look at this in a different way. There's
I
not
think you're
time for
right,
us to
Bill.
run out and get jobs in agencies. It's not happening.
Well, that's
Well-
I mean, and I just want to segue that into, because it's the last section of the show, and the topic, of course, was marketing and marketing. Trying to find a job, if you're a marketer, an agency, but first place to look. But I think you hit a very good point, and that is that it's not. In my case, I'll use my example, is that I was a very reluctant marketer. I didn't study marketing. The reason I went into this because at the time social media excited me as a business tool, as a way to improve work culture, as a way to improve communication. And because social media was basically adopted by marketing, I sort of slid into that sort of social media marketing thing because that's what it was used for most. I think people with lots of experience and life experience, whether it's in a work experience or by yourself, they have things to add to a company, but maybe it's more on a general sort of business way than as opposed to a specific marketing skill.
Well, I think we need to come back to, and I'll just say, I think relationship skills are as equally as important as understanding where the technological bar is. So BL was describing this bar of, here's the technology you got to know to be able to exist in today's workplace. And now it's, how do you find out who you want to talk to and who you want to get to know? How do you support them? Do you understand what's not being said? Do you know when to keep your own mouth shut? And do you know when to plant a seed like this big instead of giving the entire story all at once? And that goes back to a movie that we were talking about in the green room called In Good Company. He screwed up really big. The young kid came in, replaced this wise old guy, Dennis Quaid, and in the end, Dennis Quaid saved the kid's bacon, and the two learned how to work together very well in the end, and they became friends. And I think that that's something that if we get jaded, what do we do? But understanding how relationships work and watching also can help us separate the emotional side of things with the actual ability to, who do we talk to, when do we talk to them, how do we talk to them, so we understand what's not being said or how to say something without saying something to be heard.
Well, at any age, people work with people they like. People work with people they're going to feel comfortable around. So, of course, the relationship thing is immensely important, but so are your skills.
So, maybe one way to think about it is that what Jess is talking about, what you just said, BL, is the tiebreaker. You can have all the experience in the world and other sorts of things, but you have two equal people in all sorts of other areas, but one of them has the better people skills, or one of them is able to pull
Soft skills.
The soft skills, exactly. So people who have soft skills have the advantage because that's the tiebreaker. Oh, well, we'll go with that person.
Okay, so let's, before we close up, we only have a minute to go, I'd like to ask each of you to give someone out there, one of our listeners who, has fallen in love with the whole social media marketing, loves what they're doing, loves blogging, but they're over 40 years old. What advice would you give them if they want to make a living in this kind of discipline?
Well, I'll pop in first, and that is that in the real world, lots of things count. Who you married, what you look like, all those sorts of things. In cyberspace, as opposed to workspace, that's a lot less. People care what you can do and how you can do it. It's more of a meritocracy, I would say. So ageism plays less of a role, I think, in cyberspace because you can get away with, all sorts of things as long as you can produce and you have the quality that BL and Randy and Jessica were talking about.
And to put a profile photo that's 20 years earlier.
I think
Hey,
Scott,
Google search thinks I'm a 54-year-old man. This is fine with me.
Yes, Randy.
I think Scott is exactly right. I mean, he gave a good, and I would say that, I'm a consummate learner. I'm learning something every day. I've always approached my day as, what can I learn today? If I can pass something along, fine, but it's more important for me to learn something, right? And if I'm learning, I'm advancing. And in today's time, you've got to be learning. So if you want to work in this digital space, immerse yourself in it. Find as many connections as you can. There always seems to be a lending hand out there that'll pass along some tidbits to you, and that's easy to gobble up. But don't get yourself bogged down in thinking that you know it and that you can sell it, and unless you really can sell it. I mean, that's the problem, because what Scott said, it is very easy to diagnose and find out if they're just a veneer there.
Okay. Jessica.
To add to the wisdom of Scott and Randy, I'm going to go back to, who do you need to know not online as much as you know online? Because the following online is great, but who you know in your local community, can you call up for advice, who can you call up and ask for referrals, basically? Those people are as equally as important.
Thank you. Okay, BL, you get to close the show.
Well, I would definitely agree with Jessica. It is all about who you know and what your relationships are and who'll go to bat for you. But, I believe that staying up to date with technology is rule number one. And if you don't do that, you are not going to work in marketing.
Great. Thanks, all. This was an amazing show. Lots more to discuss, but we have 30 minutes, which is probably a blessing because we could go on for all day. But if you want to talk more about the subject, join us. We have a blab, post-show blab, right here. Just go to Blab. I am Ray Hiltz, and join us. We're going to be there in about just a couple of minutes. As I said, Randy is going to be co-chairing, and we're going to have your say. The comment tracker didn't work today, so I didn't get a chance to bring up any of your comments, but there's a lot of comments going on the event page. So join us over at Blab, and thanks for joining us today. It's always a pleasure. Send your ideas in for topics that you'd like to hear, and take care until next week. Bye-bye.